Jordan's hand was still warm on my neck when I realized I was already doomed. Most people thought our friendship started in high school, like it had grown out of late buses, varsity games, and cheap pizza after football practice, but Jordan had been stitched into my life way before that, back when our knees were always grass-stained and our voices hadn't settled yet. Even now, at 23, I could still pick him out by sound alone, the lazy thud of his sneakers in my hallway, the short knock he never waited to have answered, the half-laugh in his throat when he said my name like it belonged to him. "You alive in there, Malik?" He called through my apartment door, and then he opened it with the spare key I'd made the mistake of giving him 2 years ago. Cold air rolled in with him, sharp with October and laundry detergent, and he kicked the door shut behind him with the heel of his shoe. "That depends," I said from the kitchen, keeping my eyes on the cutting board because looking at Jordan first thing at night was sometimes like stepping barefoot on a hot pavement. "On whether you're here to eat my food or judge my playlist." He dropped his gym bag by the couch, all 6'2" of him in a gray hoodie with the sleeves shoved to his forearms, cheeks pink from the cold, hair damp at the temples. Both. That was Jordan. He moved through my place like it was his second skin, opened my fridge without asking, stole a grape tomato, made a face because it was the cheap kind, and leaned his hip against the counter while my speakers hummed low with an old R&B song he pretended not to like. The overhead light threw gold across the edge of his jaw. I kept slicing bell peppers into neat strips so he wouldn't notice my hands slowing down. Loving your best friend for years teaches you strange survival skills. You learn how to make yourself look normal while your chest turns traitor. You learn how to laugh when he says things like, "If I ever get married," you're giving the speech, and not let your face crack open. You learn to translate touch into friendship even when it lingers too long. Jordan had always been easy with me in ways he wasn't with anyone else. His shoulder against mine on the couch. His head dropped into my lap after long shifts at his dad's auto shop. His habit of texting me at 1 a.m. just to ask if I was awake, then showing up 10 minutes later with fries in a paper bag gone soft with grease. None of that meant what I wanted it to mean. So I kept my life arranged around the one rule that let me keep him. Want nothing, say nothing, lose nothing. "You hear me?" Jordan asked. I looked up. He was watching me now, his fingers curled around a bottle of water, brow pinched. "What?" I said. "Coach Ramirez saw me at the gas station and asked why you never come by rec league anymore." He twisted the cap and drank, throat working. "Told him you got too good for us. I work Saturdays." "Excuses." He smirked, but his gaze stayed on me a second too long. Then he reached past me for a clean fork from the drying rack, his chest brushing my shoulder in the narrow space between counter and sink. It was nothing. It was everything. Soap and cedar clung to his hoodie. My knife hit the board harder than it needed to. Jordan noticed that too. He noticed more than he should have. That was the dangerous part. We spent most evenings like this, him letting himself in, me pretending I hadn't started cooking extra by instinct, the two of us filling the apartment with ordinary sounds. Fork against skillet. Cabinet doors clicking shut. The old radiator hissing in the corner. On the surface, we looked easy. Underneath, I was always one careless second away from wanting too much. After dinner, we dropped onto the couch with our plates balanced on our knees, the TV glowing blue across Jordan's face while some action movie muttered in the background. He stole food off my plate, even though he'd already eaten half of his faster than I had, and when I elbowed him, he only grinned and knocked his leg against mine. The contact stayed there. Not accidental. Not moved away from either. My pulse started counting it. "You could just ask," I muttered. "Tastes better stolen. You're a menace." "Yeah, but I'm your menace." He said it lightly, eyes still on the screen, but the words landed low and hard. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere downtown, then faded. Inside, the room felt smaller than it was. Jordan stretched, hooked one arm over the back of the couch behind me, and for a moment his knuckles grazed the top of my shoulder. The movie kept flashing gunfire and car chases, but I couldn't have told you what happened in any of it. I was too busy staying very still, like if I moved too fast, the whole fragile shape of my life might break. When he finally stood to leave, he grabbed his keys from the coffee table, then paused by the door. "You doing anything Friday?" he asked. "Working till 6. After." The hallway light framed him in pale yellow, making his expression hard to read. "No." "What?" He rolled the keys once in his palm, metal clicking softly. "Just keep it open." Then he gave me a look I couldn't place, too intent to be casual, too quiet to be a joke, and walked out, leaving the apartment warm with food and empty in the way only he could make it. By Friday, that one sentence had worn a groove through my head so deep I could hear it under everything else. The hiss of the espresso machine at work, the scrape of chairs across concrete, the little bell over the cafe door every time someone came in from the cold. Keep it open. Jordan had texted me exactly twice that day, which was almost worse than silence. First, "You done at 6?" Then, at 5:48, "I'm outside." When I stepped out the back entrance into the alley, the air hit my face like metal, and there he was leaning against his truck under the harsh white security light, one hand in his jacket pocket, breath ghosting in front of him. "You're early," I said. "You're slow." He reached for the strap of my apron before I could answer and tugged me closer, just enough to unclip it from behind my neck. His knuckles brushed my collarbone. The alley suddenly felt too narrow. "What are you doing?" I asked, taking the apron from him. "Helping." But he didn't step back right away. His eyes stayed on my face in a way that made the fluorescent light above us feel hotter than it was. Then he cleared his throat and pushed off the truck. "Get in." "That sounds illegal." "Only if you ask too many questions." He drove us across town with the heat rattling weakly through the vents and some low indie song filling the cab. The city passed in smeared ribbons of red taillights and neon signs on wet pavement. Jordan kept one hand on the wheel and drummed the other against his thigh, restless, almost charged. He didn't tell me where we were going until we pulled into the parking lot of the indoor sports complex where we used to spend half our teenage years. Most of the building was dark except for the back gym. "You brought me here?" I asked. "What? You got a better Friday night," he said, but the corner of his mouth lifted. Inside, the place smelled like floor polish, rubber mats, and old sweat trapped in heating ducts. The lights in the auxiliary court were on, humming overhead, throwing a pale shine across the varnished wood. Jordan tossed me a basketball from the equipment rack. "First to 11. You dragged me here to lose? To remind you who you used to be before you became a caffeine dealer." We played until both of us were breathing hard, until my hoodie stuck warm at the back of my neck and Jordan's laugh started echoing off the rafters every time I missed. It felt familiar at first, almost safe. Trash talk, shoulder bumps, the hollow boom of the ball against the court. Then Jordan started doing things that were just slightly wrong. He took my wrist after a shot and kept holding it while he corrected my form, though he knew perfectly well I didn't need correcting. He stood too close behind me when he showed me some pointless fake move, his voice near my ear. "You still rush the release," he murmured. "Jordan." "What?" he said, but his hand was still around my forearm. Later, when I reached for the ball and our fingers hit at the same time, he didn't let go. The gym had gone so quiet I could hear the vents ticking overhead. He looked at our hands, then at me, and something unreadable moved across his face before he grabbed the ball and backed off with a crooked grin like he could turn anything into a joke if he did it fast enough. I should have left it alone. Instead, I started watching him back. That changed the night. After the game, we sat on the lowest row of bleachers with water bottles sweating in our hands, our jackets tossed beside us. My pulse had settled, but not really. The bright court lights bleached everything around us except the shadows under Jordan's eyes. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, then looked sideways at me. "Can I ask you something weird?" he said. "That depends how weird. You ever think about how there are things people just decide about themselves and never question again?" I let the bottle rest against my lip without drinking. "That sounds like the beginning of a crisis." He laughed once, but there was no ease in it. "I'm serious." "Since when?" "Since lately." He stood before I could answer and paced 2 steps down the bleacher aisle, then turned back, jaw tight, hands opening and closing at his sides. This wasn't the Jordan who coasted through everything with a grin. This was someone standing too close to the edge of a thought he didn't know how to say. He came back and sat beside me again, closer than before, our knees touching through denim. "Don't make a thing out of this yet," he said quietly. "Out of what?" He looked right at me then, not joking, not hiding in movement. "I need you to come over tomorrow night," he said. "Just me and you. No people, no noise." His voice dropped, rough at the edges. "I want to ask you something, and I need you not to bail before I say it." Saturday night, Jordan opened his apartment door barefoot, like he'd been pacing holes into the floor waiting for me. The hall behind me smelled faintly like somebody's burnt garlic dinner, but inside his place there was only the sharp, clean scent of soap, the low hum of the refrigerator, and music so quiet it was almost just bass in the walls. He had turned off the overhead lights. A lamp near the couch cast amber over the room, leaving the corners dim and uncertain. "You actually came," he said. "You said not to bail." I didn't think that counted as legally binding. My voice came out steadier than I felt. He gave a quick exhale that could have been a laugh, then stepped aside and let me in. Jordan's apartment had never looked this deliberate before. Usually there was a sweatshirt on the chair, mail on the counter, a socket set half open because he'd brought work home from the shop. Tonight, everything was too clean. The coffee table was clear except for 2 bottles of beer beating cold rings onto a coaster. He'd planned this. That fact landed with more force than I was ready for. "Want one?" he asked. "Sure." He handed me a bottle, our fingers clipping, and immediately dragged his own hand back through his hair. The bottle was cold enough to sting my palm. Neither of us drank. "So," I said after the silence stretched too tight, "you going to tell me why I'm here? Or should I guess until one of us dies of old age?" Jordan stayed standing while I sat on the couch, which should have given him the advantage, but somehow it didn't. He looked cornered by his own apartment. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this without sounding insane. That's never stopped you before." He smiled, but only for a second. Then he sat at the far end of the couch, elbows on his knees, bottle hanging from one hand. "You know I've dated girls. That's not fake. Okay. And I'm not confused about every person I meet." He swallowed and stared at the label he was peeling with his thumb. "It's just you." The room went very still around those 3 words. Somewhere outside, tires hissed over wet pavement. The refrigerator motor kicked on with a soft vibration. I kept my bottle balanced between both hands because if I let go of one, it might start shaking. "Jordan," I said carefully, "what does that mean?" "That's the problem." He stood again, too keyed up to stay still, and crossed to the window. Streetlight from the parking lot cut pale bars across his shoulders. "I don't know what it means. I just know when you don't answer my texts. I keep checking my phone like an idiot. When some guy at your cafe laughs too long at something you said, I want to know his name. When I'm at your place, everything feels—" He stopped and scrubbed a hand over his mouth. "Different." He turned back to me, eyes sharp now, pinned on mine like he'd finally run out of places to hide. "I keep thinking about whether it feels different to you too," he had asked. Not directly, not bravely, but he had still dragged the question into the open where neither of us could pretend not to see it. I set my bottle down on the coffee table before I dropped it. "You know it does," I said. The words were out before caution could catch them. Jordan's chest lifted. "I know we're close. Don't do that." I stood so fast my knee hit the table and one bottle rattled hard against the wood. "Don't ask me to stand in the middle of this with you, and then act like you mean friends who share fries and watch games." He froze. That was new too, Jordan, speechless. I took a breath that scraped on the way down and forced my voice lower. "What are you actually asking me?" He crossed the room in 3 steps and stopped close enough that I could see the tiny nick by his chin from shaving. "I'm asking," he said, each word slow now, deliberate, "if I can try something with you." Heat climbed straight up my neck. The lamp buzzed softly behind him. "Try what?" His jaw flexed. For 1 second I thought he might back out, laugh, ruin the whole thing before it existed. Instead he said, almost under his breath, "I want to know what happens if I stop pretending I'm not thinking about you." Then, quieter still, raw enough to change the air between us, "I want to test something." The lamp behind him gave off a faint electric buzz, and somewhere in the kitchen the refrigerator kicked on with a low shudder, filling the silence he had just split open. The air in Jordan's apartment felt too warm, carrying detergent, black coffee, and the clean cedar smell of his shirt as Malik stood there with his pulse hammering against the base of his throat. Jordan didn't move right away. He stayed near the couch with one hand braced against the cushion, jaw tight, eyes fixed on Malik like he'd already said more than he knew how to survive. "You don't get to say something like that and then go quiet," I said, and my own voice came out thinner than I wanted. Jordan let out one breath through his nose, almost a laugh, except nothing about him looked amused. "I know." He crossed the small space between us slowly, not dramatic, not reckless, just close enough that the sleeve of his t-shirt brushed my wrist. "If you want me to stop, I stop." That should have made it easier. Instead it made everything sharper. The floor under my sneakers felt uneven. The lamplight painted one side of his face gold and left the other in shadow. "You're asking me like this is a science experiment," I said. "Because if I call it anything else, I might not say it at all." His hand lifted, hesitated in the air beside my face, then settled lightly at the back of my neck. Not possessive. Worse. Careful. The kind of careful that made room for refusal and made me realize I wasn't giving one. I caught the soft scrape of his thumb against my hairline, heard the distant traffic outside his window, and then he leaned in the rest of the way. It wasn't some wild collision. It was brief, uncertain at first, more question than answer, and the second it happened the whole room seemed to narrow around that one point of contact. My hand caught in the front of his shirt without thinking. He stilled like even that had surprised him. When he pulled back, barely an inch, his breathing had changed. So had mine. "Okay," he said quietly, almost to himself. "So that's—" He didn't finish. I should have said something honest. I should have said this had been living under my skin for years. Instead, I stepped back first. The distance landed between us with a thud you could almost hear. "That can't mean what I wanted to mean," I said. Jordan's face changed at that, not angry, not defensive, just hit. He dropped his hand from my neck and looked past me toward the dark window. I didn't say it meant anything yet. Yet. The word sat there like a blade laid flat on a table. I laughed once, short and airless. "Great." He rubbed both hands over his face, then paced toward the kitchen island, bare feet soundless against the wood floor. "Malik, I'm trying not to lie to you." "Then don't." I wanted to know if it was in my head. He looked back at me, shoulders tight. It wasn't. The answer should have steadied me, but all it did was push me closer to the edge. I grabbed my hoodie from the arm of the couch, fingers clumsy in the soft cotton. Jordan took one step forward. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Leave like I broke something." I shoved one arm into the sleeve. "You did." He stopped cold. For a second, the only sound was the ice maker dropping cubes somewhere behind him. Then Jordan straightened, and something in his expression shut into place, not because he didn't care, but because he cared and didn't know what shape to give it. "If you walk out, I'm not pretending tonight didn't happen," he said. "I'm not asking you to." I got the other sleeve on and moved to the door before I could change my mind. My palm was already on the cool brass handle when his voice reached me again, lower now, rougher. "Come over Monday." I looked back. He hadn't followed this time. He stood under the kitchen light with his hands braced on the counter behind him, like he needed something solid to keep from moving. "Why?" I asked. "Because I know I'm going to think about this all day tomorrow," he said. "And if I don't see you again, I'm going to lose my mind." I opened the door. The hallway outside smelled like old carpet and someone's takeout, cold compared to the heat of his apartment. "That doesn't make this better," I said. Jordan held my gaze anyway. "I know. Monday, Malik." He didn't ask. He said it like a decision neither of us had earned yet. And when I stepped into the hall and heard the door click shut behind me, the worst part wasn't that he had kissed me. It was that now I knew exactly how little it took for me to stay. Rain tapped against Jordan's living room window on Monday night. Thin at first, and then steadier, turning the glass into a trembling gray mirror. The apartment smelled like tomato sauce and toasted bread, and Malik stopped just inside the doorway with water still darkening the shoulders of his jacket, while Jordan took the takeout bag from his hand like this had been normal all along. "You were 3 minutes late," Jordan said. "You checked?" I asked. Obviously, he didn't smile after saying it. That was the problem now. Nothing had gone back to being easy enough for jokes to hide inside. He set the bag on the counter, pushed a clean dish towel toward me, and the casualness of that tiny gesture landed harder than anything dramatic could have. I dried my hands, listening to cabinet doors click open, the hiss of rain outside, the scrape of plates against the counter. "You didn't have to come," Jordan said without looking at me. "You told me to." "Yeah." He exhaled, shoulders shifting under a faded gray t-shirt. "I know. We ate standing at the kitchen island at first, trading plastic forks and napkins because neither of us was settled enough to sit. Steam curled up from the pasta between us. Jordan talked about a class project that had gone wrong, then stopped halfway through a sentence when he realized he was doing what we both used to do, filling space so nothing real could get in. The silence that followed felt different now, not empty, just loaded. He pushed his plate aside and looked straight at me. "I thought if I saw you again it would help." "Did it?" He laughed once under his breath, then leaned both palms on the counter. "No, it made it worse." The rain thickened against the glass. My heartbeat dragged hard in my ears. Then why did you call me over? Because I wanted to know if last night only felt like that because it was the first time. He swallowed. And because I kept replaying the way you looked at me before you left. I should have walked then. Instead, I stayed where I was and watched him come around the island, slow enough to give me every chance to stop him. He didn't touch me first this time. He stood close, waiting, and that restraint shifted the balance more than if he'd grabbed me. So I reached out instead, fingers closing around the soft cotton at his wrist. The moment I did, something in his face gave way. His free hand came up to my shoulder, warm through the damp jacket. And then he pressed his forehead briefly against mine like he needed 1 second to steady himself before crossing over again. The second kiss wasn't a question. It was quieter than the first, but surer, and that certainty was worse for me because it gave hope a body. When we broke apart, Jordan didn't move far. I could hear the rain, the traffic below, and the rough catch of his breath. See, he said, voice low. It's still you. The words left a mark. Not because they were enough. Because they weren't. We ended up on the couch with the TV on mute, blue light flickering over the room while an old action movie played to no one. His socked foot nudged mine under the coffee table. My arm brushed his, then stayed there. At one point he reached over and hooked a finger into the sleeve of my hoodie, as if making sure I hadn't disappeared during the last 30 seconds. Every time I shifted away even a little, he followed without thinking. It would have been sweet if it hadn't been hidden inside that same locked box of his. This need that only existed when the blinds were shut and the world was outside. When I stood to leave, Jordan got up fast enough to make the floor creak. Already. It's after 11. Stay a little longer. There it was again. Not an answer. Not a name for anything. Just another request built on the assumption that I would keep stepping into the dark wherever he pointed. I reached for my keys from the side table, and he caught my wrist before I could pocket them. His hand was warm, grip loose enough that I could break it if I wanted. Come by Wednesday too, he said. I'm serious. Jordan, please. That word stopped me more than the hand did. He let go and dragged both palms over his face, then looked at me with the kind of naked frustration he usually buried under sarcasm. I spend all day acting normal, and then I get you here, and it's the only time my head shuts up. I stared at him, keys biting into my palm. Only here, I said. He didn't answer fast enough. That was answer enough. I opened the door to leave, and before I crossed the threshold, he said it again, rougher now, like he was asking for something he didn't know how to deserve. Wednesday, Malik. Don't make me wait until the weekend. The gym smelled like rubber flooring, metal bars, and the sharp citrus cleaner they used on the benches, and the overhead lights washed everybody in the same pale glare. Wednesday should have been ordinary. That was the problem. Malik had counted on ordinary. He had counted on distance, on sweat, on noise, on the steady clank of plates, and the bass thud leaking from somebody's headphones to scrape Jordan off his skin for at least an hour. Instead, he saw him at the far cable machine in a black tank, forearms flexed, attention snapping over the room the second I walked in like he'd been waiting without admitting he was waiting. He wasn't supposed to be here. We usually worked out on different days. He wiped his hands on a towel and came over before I could decide whether to leave. You ignored my text, he said. I was in class. For 4 hours. A guy at the front desk laughed at something behind us. A barbell hit the platform with a crash. Jordan stepped closer anyway, close enough that his shoulder nearly brushed mine in front of a full row of mirrors. You could have answered. I shoved my water bottle into the cup holder on the treadmill harder than necessary. You could have survived. His mouth tightened. This wasn't the apartment. No dim lamp. No closed door. Just cold air from the vents, fluorescent light, and people moving in every direction. For the first time since all of this started, I saw the thing underneath his late-night requests make it into daylight and come out ugly. Not cruel, just greedy. He followed me to the stretching area, then to the free weights, inventing reasons to be in reach. You doing shoulders? Now I am. You hate shoulder day. Congratulations, I said, picking up a pair of dumbbells. You know me. The words landed harder than I meant them to. Jordan's jaw shifted. For the next 20 minutes he stayed nearby, pretending to re-rack plates he hadn't used, pretending to check his phone, pretending not to track every conversation I had. When one of the girls from our old intramural team stopped to ask if I was still coming to a birthday thing this weekend, Jordan cut in before I could finish answering. He might already have plans. She blinked at him. Okay. She left with a weird smile, and I set the weights down with a clang. What was that? Jordan grabbed the end of the bench, knuckles whitening against the black vinyl. Nothing. You don't get to do that. The music overhead changed tracks, something louder, all drums and static, but I could still hear the strain in his breathing. I know what you meant. I took my towel from the bench and slung it over my shoulder. You keep asking for me in private like it's some emergency, but out here you don't even know what to call this. His eyes flicked to the people around us, then back to me. There it was. That automatic check, that recoil disguised as caution. A heat I'd mistaken for honesty suddenly looked smaller under fluorescent light. Jordan lowered his voice. Can we not do this here? That's exactly the point. I capped my water bottle, the plastic cracking under my grip. There is no here for you. There's only your apartment, your couch, your closed blinds, your schedule. He reached for my arm. I stepped back before he touched me. That tiny miss seemed to shake him more than if I'd yelled. Malik. No, my own voice came out flat and clean, which felt better than breaking. You don't get me on call because you're confused. He stared at me like I'd hit him somewhere invisible. Around us, treadmills kept humming, sneakers squeaked against the floor, somebody dropped a jump rope and cursed softly. The whole room went on being ordinary, while something between us cracked wide open in the middle of it. I grabbed my bag from the bench and started toward the exit. This time he came after me, not to stop me, but because he couldn't seem to let the distance happen without following it. At the glass doors the evening air showed blue-black outside, rainwater still shining in the parking lot under the street lamps. So what? He said behind me, voice rough now, stripped of the gym floor control he'd been trying to hold on to. You're just done talking to me? I turned with my hand on the metal push bar, cool under my palm. I'm done being where you come to figure yourself out. The words sat between us, final enough to make his face lose color. For once, I was the one leaving him there with no script. And when the door swung open and damp night air rushed in, Jordan didn't call me back. He only stood under the white lights, watching like he had just realized I could actually go. The night air outside the gym carried the wet smell of asphalt and cut grass, and somewhere beyond the parking lot a shopping cart rattled loose against a curb. My palms still felt the cold shape of the push bar when the door thudded shut behind me, sealing Jordan back inside under those white fluorescent lights. I made it halfway to my car before my phone buzzed in my pocket. His name flashed once, then again. I kept walking. The third vibration came just as I reached my handle, a dry wind lifting the hem of my t-shirt against my waist. Jordan never texted in fragments, but the screen lit up with them anyway. Wait. Then, don't leave like this. Then, a minute later, please. I stood there with the metal key dug into my thumb, engine noise humming from the road beyond the lot, and for the first time in a long time, I let his wanting sit unanswered. The next morning, sunlight came through my blinds in thin gold bars, warm across the blanket, but my apartment felt off balance without the usual message from him. No meme, no gym plan, no casual excuse to see me. By noon I had almost convinced myself he was finally doing what I asked and leaving me alone. Then my phone rang. Not Jordan. Eli from our wider friend group, his voice blown out by music and too many people talking in the background. You coming tonight? He asked. To Nora's birthday thing. Jordan said he'd probably swing by. I looked at the coffee going cold on my counter, at the dark screen of my phone. Maybe, I said. By 9, the bar was all amber light and condensation, glassware clinking, fried food, and beer hanging thick in the air. I almost turned around at the door when I saw Jordan there already, one shoulder against the wall near the pool table, a bottle hanging loose in his hand. He wasn't laughing with the others. He was scanning the room, looking. His eyes found mine so fast it made the back of my neck tighten. For a second, everything around us kept moving while he didn't. Then Nora called me over, hugging me with cold rings and perfume and birthday glitter still clinging to her cheek, and the room swallowed me before I had to decide what to do. I stayed on the opposite side of the group, talking to people I barely heard, fingers damp from the sweating glass in my hand. Every time I shifted, I could feel Jordan tracking it. Not subtle, not normal, not something a straight guy did by accident. An hour later, I was outside on the back patio, where strings of lights buzzed softly overhead, and the wooden railing held the day's last trapped heat. I had just exhaled when the door shoved open hard enough to bang the wall. Jordan stepped out, cool air and bass spilling behind him. "You're really doing this?" he said. I turned, bottleneck cold against my palm. "Doing what?" "Acting like I'm not there." "You survived." The joke didn't land. His jaw tightened. "You came here with me knowing we needed to talk." "No," I said, hearing the scrape in my own voice. "You said we needed to talk." I said I was done. Before he could answer, the patio door opened again. A guy from Eli's office, Ryan, I think, leaned out with a grin and asked if I wanted another drink while he was heading to the bar. I barely got out a no thanks before Jordan cut in. "He's good." The words hit the air flat and sharp. Ryan looked from him to me, eyebrows lifting, then gave a quick, awkward nod and slipped back inside. The bass muffled again. The string lights hummed overhead. Jordan seemed to realize what he'd done only after the door shut. His hand flexed at his side. You didn't mean what?" I asked. "To answer for me? Or to sound like I belong to you in front of people?" He dragged a hand over his mouth and looked toward the lit window, where shadows moved across the glass. "I just didn't want him hitting on you. That's the problem, Jordan." I stepped closer, the boards creaking under my sneakers. "You keep acting on instinct and then pretending it doesn't mean anything." He opened his mouth, shut it, then looked at me with that same unguarded expression he only ever seemed to wear when no one else was around. "It's not nothing," he said, lower now. "Then say it in there." I tipped my head toward the door. Music pulsed through the wall between us. Laughter burst, then faded. "Walk back in and act like this matters when people can see you." Color drained from his face so fast it was almost hard to watch. His throat moved. The bottle in his hand clicked lightly against the railing when he set it down. Inside, somebody shouted his name. Jordan glanced toward the sound, then back at me, and that tiny movement told me everything before he did. He took one step back. "Malik." My chest went still. "Right," I said. I set my untouched drink on the railing beside his and moved for the door. This time he caught my wrist, not hard, just enough to stop me under the warm bulbs and the chill creeping into the night. His fingers were cold. "Don't do that," he said roughly. "Don't make this one moment decide everything." I looked down at his hand, then up at him. "It already is." I pulled free and went inside without him, leaving him alone on the patio with both bottles sweating side by side under the lights. Rain started just after midnight, a fine hiss against the windows and fire escape, turning the streetlights outside my apartment into smeared yellow halos. By morning the city looked rinsed out, sidewalks shining, the air cool enough to raise bumps along my forearms when I opened the window over the sink. Jordan still hadn't called. That should have made things easier. Instead, his silence settled into every room like static. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone lit up with a message that was only 6 words long. "Can we talk? No games." I read it standing barefoot on my kitchen tile, cool and slightly gritty under my feet. Then I set the phone face down and let it buzz again. Half an hour later, another text came through. "At the park by your place. I'm waiting." I told myself not to go. I put on shoes anyway. The park sat 3 blocks over, damp from the rain, with wet benches and the smell of soil rising dark and rich from the flower beds. Kids were shouting near the swings. A dog shook water from its coat hard enough to make its tags jingle. Jordan was by the basketball court fence, hands shoved into the front pocket of a gray hoodie, hair still messy like he'd been dragging his fingers through it all day. He looked up when he heard my steps on the gravel path. "You came," he said. "You said no games." My voice came out even. "So talk." For once, he didn't start with excuses. He looked past me at the empty court, at the chain net tapping lightly against the rim in the breeze. "Last night," he said, "when you asked me to say it in there, I wanted to. I swear I wanted to." I folded my arms against the damp wind. "But you didn't." "I know." He nodded once, hard, like taking the hit himself. "And I'm not asking you to pretend that wasn't awful." I waited. He stepped closer, sneakers darkened by wet concrete, eyes fixed on me with a steadiness that hadn't been there before. "I don't know how to do this cleanly," he said. "I don't have some speech where I make myself sound less messed up. I just know every time you pull away, I can't think straight. I know I look for you first in every room. I know I hated seeing someone else walk up to you like I didn't matter." "That still isn't enough," I said. My throat felt scraped raw, but I kept going. "I'm not asking whether you want me when no one's around. I know that answer already." A whistle shrilled from the far end of the park. Somewhere, A stroller will hit a crack in the path with a hollow thunk. Jordan's mouth tightened. I know what you're asking. Then here it is one time, clear enough for both of us. I took the last step between us, close enough to see the rain-dark lashes at the corner of his eyes, close enough to smell laundry detergent and cold air on his hoodie. I would rather lose you completely than keep doing this halfway. So if all you have for me is hidden, stop now. Don't text me when you miss me. Don't show up jealous. Don't touch me like I'm yours in private and look away in public. You don't get both. The words landed and stayed there. No taking them back. Jordan stared at me like I had knocked the ground out from under him. His hand came up, then dropped before it reached me. You think I'm just using you. I think you keep choosing fear and calling it confusion. That one hit harder. I saw it in the way he went still. The court behind him was empty now, chain net clicking in the wind. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Jordan inhaled sharply, like the air hurt, and nodded once. Okay, he said. Just that. No defense. No reaching for me this time. He dragged a hand over the back of his neck and looked down at the wet blacktop. Then I need one chance to answer you right. I didn't speak. He looked back up. There was mud on the edge of his white sneaker, rain still clinging to the cuff of his sleeve. Tonight, he said. Eli's place. People will be there. If I show up, I show up for real. If I don't, he swallowed. You never have to do this with me again. The breeze pushed a spray of cold droplets from the trees across the path between us. My heart kicked once, hard enough to make me feel it in my ribs. That's not a test for me, I said. It's your answer. I know. He stepped back first, and that alone felt new. No grabbing. No blocking my way. No trying to keep me in the moment until I softened. Then I'll give it. He turned and started across the park, shoulders tight under the gray hoodie, leaving me by the fence with the smell of wet metal and cut grass all around me. By 7 that evening, Eli's apartment glowed warm through the second-floor windows, music low inside, voices moving in waves under the ceiling fan. I stood in the hallway outside the door for a full 5 seconds with my hand hovering near the knob, listening to my own pulse and wondering whether Jordan was about to lose me or finally walk into the light. Bass from inside the apartment door thudded softly into the hallway, mixed with the smell of pizza crust, detergent, and somebody's too-sweet vanilla candle. The brass number on Eli's door had a scratch through the middle, one I'd never noticed before, and my knuckles hovered there for a beat before I finally knocked and let myself in. Warm air hit first, then voices. A basketball game played muted on the TV while half a dozen people crowded the kitchen island with red cups and paper plates. Eli called my name from the couch. Someone handed me a drink I never asked for. I scanned the room once and hated how quickly I knew Jordan wasn't there yet. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Ice melted in my cup and made my fingers wet. Every time the front door latch clicked, my chest locked for half a second and let go again. At 20 minutes, I set the drink down on a side table and decided I was not going to stand there and let a roomful of people witness me waiting. I told Eli I was heading out. He frowned, one hand still around a slice of pizza. You sure? Jordan texted me he was coming. That made something sharp move through me, but it didn't stop me. Yeah, I said. I'm sure. The hallway outside felt cooler, quieter, the carpet flattened under my sneakers. I had just reached the top of the stairs when the building's front door downstairs banged open hard enough to echo. Fast footsteps hit the first flight. Then Jordan appeared below, breathing hard, one hand on the railing, hair windblown, cheeks flushed from the cold. He looked up and saw me above him under the dim stairwell light. Don't go, he said. Not loud, not dramatic, just immediate, like the words had been chasing him all the way here. I stayed where I was, hand on the chipped banister. You're late. I know. He climbed the rest of the stairs 2 at a time, then stopped 1 step below mine. He smelled like night air and rain that had dried on cotton. My car wouldn't start. I almost borrowed Eli's roommate's bike from 3 blocks over. He gave a short breath that almost became a laugh, but it died fast. I came. I looked at him for a long second, at the damp collar of his jacket, the pulse beating hard in his throat. That's not the whole answer. No, he said. It's not. Voices drifted from inside the apartment, then a burst of laughter, then the muffled close of a cabinet door. Jordan glanced toward the sound and did something I had not seen him do once through all of this. He reached for the apartment door instead of for me. He opened it wide. Warm light spilled across the landing, turning the dust in the air gold. People looked up. Eli leaned out from the kitchen with a paper plate in his hand. "There he is," he said. Jordan didn't laugh or throw out some easy line to smooth the moment over. He stood in the doorway with one hand still on the knob, then looked back at me where I hadn't moved. "I'm not here because Malik's my ride," he said, voice carrying farther than the music. A couple of conversations cut off. "And I'm not here because we had some weird fight." The room went so quiet I could hear the ceiling fan ticking overhead. Jordan swallowed once. Then he looked straight at me, not at the floor, not at the wall, not at any escape route. "I'm here because I've been treating the best thing in my life like something I could keep hidden until I felt brave enough," he said. "And I'm done doing that." My fingers tightened on the banister. Nobody moved. Even Eli had gone still. Jordan took one step back from the doorway, making space instead of cornering me. I kept calling it confusion because I was scared of what it meant if this wasn't just curiosity, he said. "But it's not curiosity. It's you. It's been you for a while now. And every time I tried to make it smaller or quieter, I just made it worse." The air in the hall felt suddenly thin. My mouth went dry. He wasn't finished. I could see that in the way his shoulders held, tense but steady. "I don't want to test anything anymore," he said, and now his voice dropped, meant for me even with everyone listening. "I want to be with you. In rooms like this. Out in daylight. In all the boring, real parts too. If you're still willing." The silence after that was different. Not empty. Waiting. The choice was mine now, fully, unmistakably. I went down one step so we were level, close enough to see the nerves flickering under all that effort. "You're an idiot," I said, and a laugh broke somewhere behind him, soft and relieved. Jordan let out a breath and almost smiled. "Yeah," he said. "Probably." I looked at the open door, at our friends pretending not to stare, at the bright kitchen light and the ordinary mess of paper plates and pizza boxes, and a game nobody was watching. No dramatic soundtrack. No perfect moment. Just a real one, finally. Then I reached for the front of his jacket, felt the cool zipper under my fingers, and pulled him the last few inches toward me. The kiss was brief, clean, and certain, greeted by a loud "finally" from somewhere inside the apartment and Eli's cackling laugh bouncing off the walls. When I drew back, Jordan's forehead touched mine for 1 second under the hallway light. "Still willing?" he asked, quieter now. I let my hand slide into his and turned us toward the open door. "Come inside," I said. "If you're staying, stop standing in hallways." He laughed then, full and startled and real. And when our joined hands crossed the threshold, the only thing we were testing anymore was how long it had taken us to call this love.